It is my great honor to introduce you all to the year-end award show on the Fantasy Network, The Nutties.
We waited 3 years for that terrible name.
Well, you may think it's terrible, Bobby B, but this is my favorite video to make every year. And this year, instead of doing the year-end awards with my top 10, like I've done every year prior, I'm actually going to be splitting this up. So this is the year-end awards video, The Nutties, and then I'll be doing the top 10 books of the year in a separate video where you'll see my number one overall book for the year. I'm going to be giving out some book of the years, but specific to genres, not so much number one overall. So you'll still have something to look forward to after this video, but I just want to take this time to say thank you. Thank you for another great year. It is not lost on me how fortunate I am to have an audience that watches and gives me feedback and leaves comments and has also been extremely supportive in other manners. So if you've ever watched a video, subscribe to my channel, if you've been a past, current, or future patron, I just want to take the time to say thank you. Thank you so much. This is one of the brightest spots in my life, and I'm so glad that I am here again to bring in some year-end awards. So let's do this thing. There's going to be 4 nominees for each category. There's probably a way longer list of nominees for each section. So I had to make some cuts, and the first cut was making it down to 4, and then I had to pick a winner, which honestly was very difficult. I think I worked on these for 3 to 4 hours. I take this oddly serious, even though, again, it's all kind of subjective. I hope that you will have fun going through this. Leave comments down below with you filling out each section. And if you want to list all your nominees, you can, but just tell me who wins your awards for these categories. I'd love to hear it. Let's start out the Nutties with a bang, and that is going to be Character of the Year. These are my standout characters by themselves, just I think are either tremendous, entertaining, or compelling. And the nominees are Dana from Kindred by Octavia Butler, Lisbeth Salander from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stig Larsson, Severian from Book of the New Sun by Eugene Wolfe, I think it's just Gene Wolfe. And number 4 is Demon Copperhead from Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. That's actually not his real name, but it's the name everyone actually knows the character by, so we'll just go with Demon Copperhead for his official name. And the winner is Dana from Kindred by Octavia Butler. I had to pick this character, not because Dana is a superhero and has crazy powers or just an overall ability to conquer everything, but actually because of Dana's ability to be empathetic and to put herself, maybe not put herself, but to get herself out of very bad situations without tearing down everyone else. Dana and Kindred in general, it's all very touchy. It's a tough subject, and Octavia Butler wrote a character that I think is a lot more challenging to write, one that is not as straightforward as it could have been. She could have beat us over the head with a stick with the main character telling us all the things that are wrong, but instead, Dana shows not just empathy, but grace towards someone who has, I mean, some of the worst tendencies. Like if there was an antagonist list, I think Rufus would have to be number, either him or William from Pillars of the Earth would be up there. But I just think that Dana is a character that feels like something I should aspire to be more like. And if there were more Danas in the world, possibly the world would be a better place. I don't know that for a fact, but Dana just had an impact on me once I closed Kindred, and I thought, wow, that had to be very tough for Octavia Butler to write. So Dana overall is probably the model character for this year. The other ones on this list are great and they stand out. I think Severian has a whole lot of talking point and a whole lot of problems. And he was very close to taking this, but I'm going to stick with Dana from Kindred. Next is the New Author to Me Award, my favorite new author that I've never read before 2023. There are a lot of authors on this list. I try to vary my reading greatly. I read it different genres. I mean, I'm predominantly sci-fi and fantasy, but I read a lot of things, and authors can make an impact on me for various reasons, whether it be entertainment, writing style, or overall just how they tell their story. Every author has their strengths. I think everyone on this list is most likely strong at something different from the other ones. And this is not necessarily the author that maybe wrote my favorite book of the year, but just an author that I feel like I have some sort of connection with and that I have an optimistic feeling about for the future. And again, all these are that, but there's one that stands out the most out of all 4. So the nominees are Leo Tolstoy, Barbara Kingsolver, David Mitchell, not the one from television, and Gene Wolfe. A lot of Gene Wolfe already. We're only 2 awards in. The winner is David Mitchell. I read The Bone Clocks and Slade House, which people always say that you should read those in that order. And this is just someone who I knew was probably pretty good, gets lumped into the literary crowd a little bit more, but make no mistake about it. It's magical realism, it's urban fantasy, I still count it as fantasy. And David Mitchell wrote a wonderful foreword for The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, and that is actually what finally pushed me over the edge to start reading David Mitchell. And I just have a feeling about this guy. I think he has some of the best connective tissue between short story vignettes that I've seen that end up making this big overall narrative. And he has an imagination that is just impressive. When I would put his imagination up there with someone like a China Miéville, except that David Mitchell still somehow grounds it in our reality, which I think is a pretty tough thing to do. But David Mitchell had just written some really interesting characters in the Bone Clocks and Slade House, and the way that he actually jumps over time periods, and you can go ahead in decades in his story, but still make it all feel like it's all part of the same narrative, is really, really impressive to me. And I just have a feeling that David Mitchell is going to end up being something special, and maybe one of my all-time favorites. I say a lot of the times that people could make my all-time favorites list, and I have people say, how many people are in your top 10? I've actually counted. I've said it about 20 times on the channel, about 20 different authors, and most of them I say they may make the list. I didn't say they did make the list. So in the future, near future, I'm going to put out my top 10 favorite authors list. Will David Mitchell make that cut? Possibly. We'll have to see whenever it comes to crunch time. But David Mitchell is my favorite new author of 2023. Congratulations, David Mitchell. I know you're a huge fan of the channel.
Oh my goodness.
It's the biggest surprise of the year. And this one's always fun because there's books that just take us out of nowhere. And that's what a lot of these books are. A lot of the times with the biggest surprise of the year, it usually comes from a genre I am not familiar with, or a style of writing I'm not familiar with, or a story directed at a different type of person than I am. And I think all of these kind of make that list. The nominees are Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, Sand Kings by George R.R. Martin, Night of Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones, and The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. Boy Parts, I did not expect to love, and I did. Sand Kings, I thought it was going to be George R.R. Martin's short story about a Dune ripoff. I was completely wrong. Night of Mannequins, thought it was going to be like the movie Dead Silence. The Golden Compass, I thought it was only for children. I would get absolutely zero out of it, which ended up not being true. But the winner of the Nutty for biggest surprise of 2023 is Night of Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones, a novella, about 120 pages. I think this book has an unreliable narrator and is not just about like a possessed doll going around or many possessed mannequins going around and killing people. No, not at all. It is almost a hallucination. And it's one of those books that's extremely polarizing because Stephen Graham Jones by himself already just has his own very distinct style that I happen to like. But Night of Mannequins is also one of those that you can read it and go, what did I just read? But I found when I reread sections that the entire story changed once I went back. And I love those type of stories. I ended up reading this with Murphy, my good friend. And I know Evie, one of my other friends, loves this. And it's always going to be a love-or-hate situation with this one, I think. And for me, it was a love and was definitely the biggest surprise of the year. I read it basically just to read something spooky in October and came away with one of my favorite reads of 2023.
Aw, shucks, mister.
The disappointment of the year. You can't go through a whole calendar year reading without being at least slightly disappointed. And in this case, there were a few books that greatly disappointed me. There are some on here that there's been things that have disappointed me, but not all of them made it. For instance, I would say Otherland Book 2 was a bit disappointing, but honestly, I wasn't as hyped for the series after I read Book 1, knowing it was going to be a little bit of a slow start. I was disappointed that that story didn't pick up. But these ones are books that I had a feeling were going to be monumental in the year. And honestly, I think maybe 3 of these 4, I expected to make my top 10 books of the year. One of the books is the one I thought would be a new favorite of all time. And it didn't land for me, unfortunately. So the nominees for the Nutty for Disappointment of the Year go Licanius Trilogy. I read books 2 and 3 this year, but I'm going to just lump 2 and 3 together and say Licanius Trilogy. The 11th Cycle by Kian Ardelin. Is that how you say that? Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. And Tagana by Guy Gavriel Kay. I want to make something very clear. I actually don't hate Tagana. It's just that I was expecting Tagana to literally become maybe my favorite book of all time. Just had a feeling about it, and sometimes that intuition is completely wrong. And I've read 3 or 4 other Guy Gavriel books. I have another Guy Gavriel book that I'm going to talk about a lot when I'm talking about my favorite books of the year. Tagana just unfortunately did not work for me, but it's not because I don't think Guy Gavriel is a fabulous writer. I just don't love the corn swords. But tangent aside, the disappointment of the year in 2023 is, drumroll, 11 Cycle. Unfortunately, 11 Cycle was a self-published book that had a lot of 5-star reviews for people who were getting arcs, and I was most interested in this thing because it was going to be inspired by the Dark Souls video games. And also, I heard maybe a sprinkle of Berserk in there, which I love Berserk very much. This was such a letdown on every single level, almost. And you might say, well, how can you be so disappointed? It's a self-pub debut. Well, I was literally counting down the days till this thing came out. The cover looked cool. The premise sounded interesting, and I had seen a lot of people giving it 5 stars. And I'm not saying that they didn't have a 5-star experience, but me, I guess I should say a disclaimer, I didn't finish this book. I DNF'd it. I DNF'd it twice because I read the first, I think, 3 chapters. I DNF'd it because I thought it was not good. And then I felt as if maybe I was being biased. I came back to it a little bit later and I read 10 chapters in and I DNF'd it again. I thought the dialogue was incredibly corny. I did not enjoy really any of the setup of the world, even though there were cool things in it. And a lot of those things in the world felt almost identical to the things that I've seen in Dark Souls. So it didn't feel like a new spin on these things. It felt like someone kind of playing with those assets almost. And beyond that, there were times where like the wrong version of words were being used in the wrong instance. There's typos in a lot of books, so I'm not going to just sit here and harp on that. But a lot of it came across as incredibly corny to me. And unfortunately, I think it's my least favorite book I've read since I started BookTube. This is not supposed to be so negative. I'm sorry. I'm disappointed. I was very disappointed. So unfortunately, 11th Cycle will have the crown of the biggest disappointment of 2023. This is a brand new year-end award, and I'm excited to do it because I actually made this a focus of my reading this year. And the award, this nutty, is called Oldie But a Goody. This is going to be anything I read that's published before the 1980 mark. So 1979 and backwards, fair game. And yes, I know that the 70s and 60s aren't that long ago. That doesn't mean it's super old, but in the YouTube sphere, people don't talk too much about those eras, at least from what I see. I could always be wrong, but I made it a point to read a good amount of stuff in these periods, all the way back, into the 40s and 50s. And I would say I had a great time with a lot of them, and it was really cool. And I would suggest that if you haven't read a lot of older stuff, go check it out. I think I had 15 to 20 books this year that could have made this list. I am not going to be including short stories or novellas. So for instance, Conan is out, Tolstoy is out, and some other ones. These are going to be novels. And I did that because I felt like it gave a better idea of if I was going to be enjoying the work. So like Conan, I only read the first one. I need to read more Conan. But the novels are Ubik by Philip K. Dick, Kindred by Octavia Butler, The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin, and 1984 by George Orwell. The winner of the Oldie But a Goody Award for 2023 is Kindred by Octavia Butler. This book was impactful, to say the least. I've kind of already talked about Dana and how special she was, I thought, as a protagonist, but this book just overall, I think people writing about important topics, especially to them, could learn a lesson about the way Octavia Butler presents morality and how she kind of guides us through all of the messiness that comes with these questions. And I just think that Kindred's a fantastic book. I also love that Octavia Butler wrote in a very plain, straightforward language. That way nothing could be misconstrued. When she did make a point, it was there, legible on the paper. There's no real room to misinterpret something that she was saying. And I think that's actually really important when you're dealing with important topics such as slavery that's in Kindred. I don't know if I would ever enjoy reading that book again. It made me viscerally angry. There was only 2 books this year that made me that way, where I wanted to throw the book down. I actually did take a break from this book for a little bit because it was making me so upset. And that is Kindred, and then another book I'll talk about a little bit later. But Kindred is important. I think, at least for me. So it is the winner of the Nutty for the Oldie Buddy Goody word. The next Nutty is Book Series of the Year award. This is going to be for series I completed in 2023. So Black Company, Book of the New Sun, I haven't finished those, so they're not on this list. And this is a tough one. This is probably the hardest competition for these 4 nominees. And I wanted to do ones that I've completed because I feel like I have a better picture overall of what they are. I may have started them in a year prior, but I finished them, at least like 2 of the books, this year in 2023. And the nominees are Remembrance of Earth's Past by Cixin Liu. I always mess up the way to say that. That's a 3-body problem trilogy. That's how everyone actually knows it. The Baslag series by China Miéville, which is 3 books. Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. And the Millennium Trilogy by Stig Larsson. All of these are excellent, and any of them could win this award, so I want to stress that. But the winner is, for the best completed series on the Fantasy Network in 2023, the Nutty goes to The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. I think it's important to give this award to The Long Price Quartet because as a complete story, I think it is excellent. I think it is fantastic. Sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't have made just better for one massive 1,000-page book rather than a couple 200-page novels put together. Each one tells a very individual story, but we follow characters throughout their entire life. And I think Daniel Abraham is giving really the blueprint of how to do a generational type story. And it really comes together as its whole. The reason why I think it's important to kind of recognize this is because of how excellent I thought the series was, but none of the books will make my top 10 because I think it's the whole of the series that is special. And none of the characters made my favorite characters of the year's list because they all need each other in a way. And Ota and Madi, I mean, if you've read it, you will know what I'm talking about, but I think it's just stupendous. This is one of the most unpopular things that is on my list. And I know there's been a lot of people who have tried book 1 and fallen out of it because of the posing or the slow pace. And I totally get it. But when I look at the entirety of Long Price Quartet, I think this is something that, for me, just screams great fantasy. Short fiction of the year. This is a novella or a short story. I read a lot of short fiction this year, which was really wonderful. But these are the 4 that stood out to me. And the nominees are The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Ilyich? I don't know. By Leo Tolstoy. Sand Kings by George R.R. Martin. Phoenix on the Sword by Robert E. Howard, Conan story. And Night of Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. And the winner is, for short fiction of the year, the Nutty goes to Sand Kings by George R.R. Martin. Come on, you guys knew I was biased.
You're a predictable hack. You know that?
I know it's predictable, but here's the thing. I love this. And I think that the 40-some pages that Sand Kings is some of the best writing George R.R. Martin's ever done. And I think it, in that time, encapsulates a lot of the special things that George R.R. Martin is able to do. Written back in the 80s, well before A Song of Ice and Fire. George R.R. Martin was known as a sci-fi writer. You know, he wrote on The Twilight Zone, and he's done just a lot of things. He's worked with a lot of different people. And the joint of horror, like the joint elements of horror and sci-fi come together in a 40-page, just harrowing story. Very creepy, crawly in a way, and has a lot to say. And I think you could really pull some meaning from this as well. So it's entertaining. It's kind of fun. Definitely a little bit creepy. And I think it's impactful. Death of Ivan Ilyich could have won this award. I think it being a story about mortality automatically puts it pretty high in my favor because that seems to be something that I'm always interested in diving into. But I just feel like I was so impressed with what happened in 40 pages from George R.R. Martin. I know Night of Mannequins won the biggest surprise of the year. That's because I did not expect it to be this good. But I still think on the whole, I enjoyed Sand Kings more than any of the other ones on this list. And George, I know you're a huge fan of the channel. You should come on Chatting with Nuts. And I know this means a lot to you. So congratulations, buddy.
You need new jokes like I need legs.
Non-sci-fi or fantasy book of the year. I have read a decent amount of other genres. I've been reading some classics, some historical fiction, some general fiction, contemporary fiction, and everything else. I've been trying to get around, the circles. My taste is fairly wide, I would say, and there were some just tremendous books that if you're here for fantasy and sci-fi, maybe you'll give one of these a shot and check out something outside of the genre. That'd be great. If not, I totally get it. But the Nutty nominees for non-science fiction and fantasy book of the year, we'll say general fiction, is 1, The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. This is a Pulitzer winner about the Civil War, Battle of Gettysburg. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. A boy in Appalachia in a foster home trying to make it through. And The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stig Larsson, which is part of the Millennium Trilogy, made into a major motion picture, crime, thriller type deal. And Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee, Nobel Prize winner, which is crazy. All these books are absolutely fantastic, and I recommend at least 3 of them pretty much widely. But the one that I am hesitant to recommend is the winner of this Nutty, and that is Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. I keep wanting to call him Joe Coetzee. It's J.M. Coetzee. A very difficult book, and this is the book with Kindred that made me the most upset. It has every trigger warning you could ever imagine. It is a disgrace, I get it, professor who has slept with a student and is ostracized and kicked out and faces punishment, even though people are trying to protect him, which is all kinds of messed up. So he goes out to this farm, and by the way, this is all taking place in South Africa. And he goes out to be on a farm with his daughter, who he's had kind of a disjointed relationship with, and then more disgrace follows suit. This has all the makings of being a story that will tear you to pieces, with a problematic main character that is very difficult to be in the head of, but is written so truly. It's upsetting that some of the most terrible things that happen in this book are real and happen every single day. And I think J.M. Coetzee does a great job of taking care in those times. He has a very plain way of talking to you through his prose, but always knows the right way to state something or the right word to use. His diction is incredible. A true masterful piece of fiction. And Disgrace is one I'm hesitant to recommend because it is so difficult to get through at times. But it made me sick, but it also made me think quite a bit. And when a book can emotionally impact me, it immediately goes up the list, and Disgrace is going to win this. All these books are great, but Disgrace is one that will live in my brain probably for the rest of time. If you like questions about morality, this is one to go on. Or if you like following around just a very problematic person and other problematic people in the story as well, this won't be for you. There's a lot of messes here and a lot of disgrace, which is why it's so aptly named. So congratulations. It's not a Nobel Prize, but it is a Nutty. All right, this is the one y'all been waiting for. The science fiction or fantasy book of the year. This is the longest list of nominees that I had to cut because I predominantly do read science fiction and fantasy, though this year probably more of a mix of all the genres together than ever before. There was some really good stuff. I think this year is one of those years where I had to start branching out a bit. And because of that, I don't know if I found all-time new favorite, like, if I made a top 20 fantasy sci-fi books of all time. I don't think a large percentage of these would make that list, but the 4 here would certainly be in the conversation, or at least 2 to 3 of them, I would say. So the nominees for the Nutty for Science Fiction Fantasy Book of the Year, SFF Book of the Year, is 1, A Song for Our Bone by Guy Gavriel Kay, Kindred by Octavia Butler, Traitor Boru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson, and The Scar by China Miéville. This is so hard. And even as I say it, I sit here and I question like whether I left one off the list or if I picked the right one, but you got to go with your gut. And the one that I think was just the tightest of them all and still had things about it that I thought were adventurous and brave choices and a lot of imagination. The winner of the SFF Book of the Year, the Nutty Award winner, The Scar by China Miéville, Book 2 in the Baslag series. Woo! This is tough. The Scar by China Miéville is such a tight book to me. It's not short, but it's tight. And has all of the wild imagination of China Miéville that he established in Perdido Street Station with his beautiful off-the-wall writing, and in all of his ways, such a distinct, original person, while still taking influences from other works like Ursula K. Le Guin or many of the others, giants of the genre. But The Scar, you have a floating city, and you have big questions about love and manipulation. And the relationships that get formed on this, I guess you could call it a journey, are ones that will make you really feel as if they're fighting for their lives, or they're fighting for whatever their motivation actually is. And the commentary on love and the use of other people and manipulation, all of it is fantastic. And then all the while, China Miéville almost feels like he's having a conversation with the fantasy genre at points and subverting some things that are really cool. But it also, and this stands for the Bass Lag as a whole, some of the best world building in fantasy, in my opinion. The Bass Lag is full of metaphysical craziness, different creatures, consciousness can be eaten. I mean, it's crazy stuff. The Scar, to me, is like the most complete package of the Bass Lag when you look at all three books. I think Iron Council gets a little bit of a bad rap. I think it's his most adventurous and most out there. I think it'll be better on a reread. And Perdido Street Station is a hell of a book that does get a bit messy in the middle, in my opinion, and is a little rough around the edges, whereas The Scar is China Miéville hitting that stride, never letting up, and has to be one of the most underread sequels in any series I know. I know so many of you who have read Perdido Street Station and then just for some reason never read The Scar. If you've read Perdido and you even liked it a little bit, I suggest that you should read The Scar. There is some stuff in this that is going to blow your mind that's like just cool out there, lasers, fireball fantasy, while also just being so beautifully written. He never holds your hand, which I really appreciate. And I just think China Miéville is a fantastic writer. And I think The Scar is a tremendous sequel and just an overall great fantasy book that I hope that you will check out. And if you haven't read Perdido, get on it. I mean, it's crazy. China Miéville is someone that I think should be read even more. He's had a lot of critical acclaim, but he's not loved by the masses. As I feel like he should be. And I would hope that maybe, just maybe, he would return to the Bass Lag series to write another story, because that would make my day. So The Scar by China Miéville wins the real big one, the big nutty, if you will, for SFF Book of the Year. I know a lot of my subscribers are here for the science fiction and the fantasy, and that is, I think, the best. Song for Our Bone was second, I think. I think that would be second, and then followed by Kendra, then TBC. But there's other books that could have been put in here that were science fiction and fantasy. And making that top 10 list that's going to be coming out probably next week is going to be a tall task. Now, you might be wondering, well, Jimmy, we already know what the SFF Book of the Year, but you don't know in what order the top 10 will be. Will a fantasy book be at the top as it has in the past 2 to 3 years? Maybe, or maybe not. Who knows? Well, I know, but do you know? You don't know, so you should watch it whenever it comes out. So even though this is the third, I think, time I've done the year-end awards, it is the first time it's ever been officially dubbed the Nutties. So thank you for being here for this very important event. Like I said, I will be putting all these books in a top 10 list, and we're not sure where these, nonfiction book of the year or sci-fi fantasy book of the year will be put. So that order is going to be very difficult to do. And I might not even just do a top 10. I might do a top 12. We'll see. I feel like everyone does top 10. Why not do maybe the top 11 or something like that? Maybe shake it up a little bit. But take all these categories, go down in the comments, and let me know what wins your awards. I would love to hear it. And thanks for another great year. 4 years in January I've been doing this. It's absolutely insane. I can't believe it's been that long. But thank you for being here. Thank you for watching it. If you like this video, you can hit like. If you dislike it, hit dislike. If it's your first time here, I would love to have you subscribe and be here. We do all types of cool bookish stuff here. And I think you won't regret it. Plus, it's free, which is great. But also, if you want to support monetarily, there's a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. Until I see you next time, be good, be safe, happy holidays, and remember to always keep turning the page. I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons, including my high tier patrons, my Kingsguard Witches, Bridger, Zan, Adam K, Amel, Curtis L, Jonathan J, Prithvi, Eric B, Chadia, Steve Talks Books, Taylor D, Matthias D, Carlos, Yolanda, Amanda L, John C, John, Garrick, Evie, Henrik, Benjamin C, Sebastian M, Frank C, C. Scott, Jacob Wade, Darren, Jobot, Terrence F, Michael B, Lauren M, Nicholas E, Kai, Kev, Ryan, J, Shad, Amanda V, Ikaika, RJ, Stewart, Oscar, Derry, Tanner, Stromboli Bones, Damon H, and Robert M. Thank you all so much. You are the best.